He conquered Europe, 30 battles, 0 defeats. But Russia didn't fight him with armies. It fought him with emptiness, scorched earth, endless winter, roads that vanished into nothing. Charles XII marched 40,000 soldiers into the abyss. Only hundreds crawled back. What destroyed the greatest army in Europe? Russian steel or Russia itself? 1708. Charles XII is 26 years old and already a legend. King of Sweden, genius of war. Behind him lies a trail of shattered armies and broken kings. Denmark, crushed in weeks. Saxony, on its knees. Poland, trampled into dust. And Russia? At Narva in 1700, he destroyed an army 4 times his size. Peter I fled the battlefield, abandoning cannons, banners, and his dignity. Europe whispers one name with fear and awe, the Swedish Lion. Charles doesn't just win battles, he dominates them. His infantry marches into cannon fire without flinching. They reload faster than anyone in Europe. They break enemy lines with cold steel and iron discipline. And Charles himself? He leads from the front. No bodyguard, no armor. Bullets miss him like he's blessed by fate. But fate is about to change sides. Summer, 1708. Charles invades Russia with 40,000 of the finest soldiers Europe has ever seen. The plan is simple: march to Moscow, crush Peter's army, end the war. But then he makes a decision that will haunt history. Instead of Moscow, he turns south, to Ukraine, to a man named Mazeppa, a Cossack hetman who promises 50,000 riders and supply depots overflowing with grain. It's a gamble, a catastrophic one, because Peter isn't going to fight, not yet. He's learned his lesson from Narva, so he does something unexpected, something brutal. He burns Russia itself, scorched earth. As the Swedes march deeper, Russian forces torch everything: villages, grain stores, bridges, livestock slaughtered or driven away. The Swedish army advances through a desert of ash, no food, no shelter, and winter is coming. By autumn, the cold arrives early. Not regular winter, the kind that splits trees and freezes breath mid-air. Soldiers die in their sleep. Horses collapse and freeze solid before they can be butchered. Frostbite claims thousands. The greatest army in Europe is rotting from within. And Mazeppa? He arrives with barely 2,000 men. No grain, no depots. The Cossacks didn't follow. Ukraine is a trap. But Charles never retreats, even as his men starve, even as winter slaughters them by the hundreds. He pushes forward to a fortress called Poltava, June 1709. A musket ball shatters Charles's foot. The invincible king is carried on a stretcher, feverish, barely conscious. And Peter's rebuilt Russian army, 50,000 strong, well-fed, dug in, waits across the field. Can an army without its leader defeat an empire? Stay with me, because what happens next will redraw the map of Europe in blood. So, what really killed the Swedish Empire? Not one thing. A perfect storm of miscalculation, nature, and an enemy who refused to play by the rules. First, the logistics nightmare. War is math. 40,000 men need tons of food every day. Horses need even more. Charles planned to live off the land. Standard practice in Europe. Armies marched, found villages, took supplies, moved on. Simple. But Russia isn't Europe. Villages are spread across vast distances. Roads barely exist. And Peter's scorched earth policy turned the entire countryside into a graveyard. Every farm burned, every grain store torched, wells poisoned. The Swedes march for days without finding anything but ash and corpses. By winter, they're eating their horses. then their boots, then bark from trees. Frostbite spreads like plague. Fingers and toes turn black and snap off. Men collapse and never get up. Of the 40,000 who entered Russia, nearly half are dead or too sick to fight before a single major battle. The finest army in Europe is dying from hunger and cold. Second, Peter learned. At Narva in 1700, the Russians were a disaster. Poorly trained peasants with rusty weapons. Peter fled in humiliation, but humiliation is a brutal teacher. For 9 years, Peter rebuilt everything. He hired foreign officers, drilled his troops relentlessly, founded weapons factories, studied European tactics and stole what worked. By 1709, the Russian army is transformed. Modern artillery, disciplined infantry, fortified positions. They're not the mob Charles crushed at Narva. They're a real fighting force. And Peter does something brilliant. He refuses to give Charles the battle he wants. No grand clash in open fields where Swedish discipline dominates. Instead, he makes Charles chase shadows, exhausts him, starves him, waits until the Swedes are weak, desperate, and half dead. Third, Charles's fatal flaw. Genius has a shadow. Charles is brave to the point of madness. He's won so many impossible victories that he believes he's untouchable. When generals suggest retreat, he ignores them. When the Ukrainian gamble collapses, he pushes forward anyway. When winter slaughters his army, he refuses to turn back. It's not confidence, it's arrogance. He underestimates Peter, underestimates Russia, overestimates his own legend. Great commanders adapt to reality. Charles bends reality to his will until reality breaks him. Fourth, the new Russian war machine. By June 1709, the numbers are brutal. Charles has 24,000 starving, frost-bitten soldiers. Peter has over 40,000 fresh troops dug in behind earthworks, supported by heavy cannons. The Russians have every advantage: numbers, supplies, position, and artillery. And the Swedish king, the man whose mere presence could turn battles, is crippled, bleeding, strapped to a stretcher. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. But Charles still believes he can win, because he always has. One final roll of the dice, one last charge into hell, and across the field, Russia waits. June 27th, 1709, dawn breaks over Poltava. The Swedish army forms up in darkness. 24,000 men, starving, exhausted, but still the best infantry in Europe. They've done this 100 times. March, fire, charge, break the enemy, win. Charles is strapped to a stretcher between two horses. His foot is shattered, gangrenous. Fever burns through him, but his eyes are sharp. He gives the order, attack. The plan is brutal and simple. Smash through the Russian redoubts. Earthwork fortifications protecting Peter's camp. Once inside, superior Swedish discipline will tear the Russians apart in close combat. It worked at Narva. It has to work now, 4 in the morning. The Swedes advance through the pre-dawn gloom. At first, it goes well. Swedish columns punch through outer defenses. Russian soldiers fall back. For a moment, it feels like old times. The legend still holds. Then everything fractures. In the darkness, Swedish units lose coordination. Some push too far, others stall. Communication breaks down. And the Russian artillery, Peter's pride, his modernized killing machines, opens fire. Cannonballs rip through tight Swedish formations. Grape shot shreds entire ranks. Men vanish in explosions of blood and smoke. The disciplined advance becomes chaos. Charles, barely conscious on his stretcher, tries to maintain control, but his voice doesn't carry. His generals make panicked decisions. Units fragment. The perfect Swedish machine is breaking apart. By 8 in the morning, the Swedes regroup for one final push. They form a massive line, muskets ready, bayonets fixed, 20,000 men preparing to charge straight into hell. And Peter is waiting. 42,000 Russian soldiers behind fortifications, artillery loaded and ranged. Peter himself rides along the front lines. A musket ball strikes his saddle, another pierces his hat. He doesn't flinch. His army watches. Their Tsar isn't hiding in the rear. He's here. The Swedes march forward. Russian cannons erupt in coordinated fury, not scattered shots. A wall of fire. Swedish lines shatter, officers fall, formations dissolve. The unstoppable Swedish infantry staggers. Then Peter orders the counterattack. Russian cavalry slams into Swedish flanks. Infantry pours from the fortifications in waves. Swedes are surrounded, outnumbered 3-1, outgunned. They fight with desperate courage, but there's no miracle left. Just math. And the math is annihilation. By noon, it's over. 9,000 Swedes dead or captured. The rest fleeing south in complete disorder. Charles, still on his stretcher, is carried from the field by his bodyguard. The king who never lost is now a fugitive running for his life. Peter walks the battlefield among the dead. Russian soldiers kneel as he passes. He's no longer the Tsar who ran at Narva. He's Peter the Great. And Sweden, for 2 centuries the terror of Northern Europe, is finished. One battle, one morning, the entire world shifts. Charles doesn't stop running. From Poltava, he flees south with barely 2,000 men. Russian cavalry hunts them. Cossack raiders close in. At the Dnieper River, the last remnants of his army, 16,000 soldiers, lay down their weapons and surrender. The greatest military force in Europe becomes prisoners of war. Charles refuses to join them. He crosses the river under cover of darkness and disappears into Ottoman territory. For 5 years, he lives in exile in Turkey, a guest turned prisoner of the Sultan, plotting impossible comebacks that will never happen. When he finally returns to Sweden in 1714, his empire is already gone. 1718, Charles dies in a trench in Norway, shot through the head during a minor siege. Some say enemy fire. Others whisper assassination. It doesn't matter anymore. The legend died years earlier, frozen in Ukrainian mud. Sweden never recovers. The age of Swedish dominance ends at Poltava. The nation survives, but as a shadow, a second-tier power watching from the sidelines as others reshape Europe. Russia becomes everything. Peter declares himself emperor. The Russian Empire is born. St. Petersburg rises from the swamps, a new capital built on the ruins of Swedish ambitions. For the next 2 centuries, Russia will dominate Eastern Europe, its power rooted in one lesson: survive long enough, and your enemy destroys himself. So why did Charles fail? Not because he lacked courage, not because his soldiers weren't skilled enough. He failed because he believed his own myth, because he thought willpower could conquer logistics, that genius could defeat geography, that one man's brilliance could overrule winter, hunger, and 1,000 miles of nothing. Russia didn't just beat Sweden at Poltava. Russia taught Europe a lesson that Napoleon would ignore a century later, that Hitler would ignore after him. You don't conquer the endless cold. You don't outlast Russian winter. You don't win by marching east into infinity and expecting the land itself to surrender. Charles XII entered Russia as an invincible legend. He left as a cautionary tale, the frozen march that broke an empire, the king who never learned when to stop. And somewhere in the snow, 40,000 ghosts still march east, searching for a victory that was lost the moment they crossed the border.